Supreme Court. Justices are hearing arguments on the president's authority to impose tariffs on any international country. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman is live outside of the Supreme Court and joins me now to talk about it. Katrina, all right, here's where we're looking. Catch us up. What have we learned so far?
Hi, Vlad. Well, first of all, I'm out in front of the Supreme Court, and there is a long line of people here who are waiting to get into these arguments. This is such a big case that it's really drawing a crowd.
Okay, so something huge just happened that's exposing how desperate and panicked the Trump administration really is right now. A wave of Supreme Court leaks and behind-the-scenes reporting has thrown the White House into complete turmoil over two of the most explosive legal fights of Trump's presidency: food aid for millions of Americans and his signature tariff powers. We're talking about internal briefs and emergency orders that reveal just how badly things are going for Trump's legal team. We're talking about the administration scrambling to draft backup plans because they're increasingly convinced they're about to lose big at the Supreme Court. And we're talking about justices who are so fed up with Trump's legal games that they're demanding same-day answers and putting extraordinary pressure on his lawyers to stop playing around. This is not what a confident, winning administration looks like. This is what panic looks like when you realize the highest court in the land isn't going to rubber stamp your power grab. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. Let me break down what's happening, because there are two separate but connected crises unfolding at the Supreme Court right now. The first involves SNAP benefits, food stamps for roughly 42 million low-income Americans. As we've covered before, Trump's administration tried to slash these benefits during the government shutdown, only paying 65% of what people were owed. Lower courts ordered them to pay in full. Trump's team has been fighting that order, trying to get the Supreme Court to let them cut food aid while the legal battle plays out. And now we're seeing just how messy and desperate that fight has become. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson temporarily paused the district court order requiring full payments, but then she did something extraordinary. She demanded a same-day update from Trump's lawyers, asking them to state clearly whether they still intended to pursue a stay on the full payment requirement. She basically told them to stop playing games and tell the court what they actually want. That's a justice saying, "I'm tired of your legal maneuvering. Give me a straight answer right now." The response from Trump's Solicitor General was revealing. They admitted they were both fighting the court order requiring full payments and hoping Congress would bail them out with shutdown legislation that would make the whole issue go away. Like, they're simultaneously asking the Supreme Court to let them cut food aid while also hoping they won't have to follow through because maybe Congress will fix things. That's not a coherent legal strategy. That's desperation. That's throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks while millions of families wait to find out if they'll have enough money to buy groceries. SCOTUS blog and CNN are describing this as extraordinary pressure from the court on the administration. The justices are clearly getting frustrated with Trump's legal team trying to have it both ways, fighting to cut benefits while refusing to commit to a clear position on what they actually want. And that frustration is showing up in the orders and demands the court is issuing. The tariff situation is equally revealing about how shaky Trump's legal position really is. As we've discussed before, the Supreme Court heard arguments about whether Trump has the authority to impose massive tariffs using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The justices were deeply skeptical during oral arguments, questioning whether Congress ever intended to give presidents such sweeping power over trade. And now we're learning that the administration is so worried about losing that case that they're already developing fallback options. Bloomberg and Forbes are reporting that the White House is drafting backup plans in case the justices rule Trump's tariffs illegal. They're looking at narrower country-specific duties. They're exploring new negotiations. They're preparing for a world where their signature trade policy gets gutted by the Supreme Court. And here's the thing, this internal planning has leaked. So while Trump is publicly insisting he's going to win at the Supreme Court, internal documents show his own team is preparing for defeat. That's a huge credibility gap. That's the president saying one thing while his administration prepares for the opposite outcome. The combination of these two crises paints a picture of a White House in complete reactive mode. On Snap, they're begging the court for more time while trying to avoid committing to a clear position. On tariffs, they're publicly confident while privately drafting Plan B policies. They're trying to calm Republican nerves on Capitol Hill. They're trying to spin what increasingly looks like looming legal defeats as part of some bigger America First strategy. But the leaks are undermining all of that spin. When internal documents show you're preparing fallback options, you can't credibly claim you're confident about winning. When justices are demanding same-day answers because they're frustrated with your legal games, you can't credibly claim everything is under control.
The Supreme Court is considering a major legal challenge to many of President Donald Trump's tariffs. The justices largely seem skeptical that he has the power to set and change them on his own without input from Congress. The courtroom was packed today with both lawmakers and officials from the Trump administration. This is a major part of President Donald Trump's agenda on both the economic and foreign affairs fronts, and it's one that he has paid close attention to. The tariffs case is important both because that is a centerpiece for President Trump's agenda.
This is an administration that's losing its grip on the narrative because the Supreme Court itself is exposing how weak their legal positions really are. So buckle up, because we're about to dive into exactly what these leaks reveal, why the Supreme Court is putting unprecedented pressure on Trump's lawyers, what the backup plans for tariffs look like, and what all of this means for Trump's second-term agenda that's increasingly running into legal brick walls. Let's break it down. All right, so let's get into the specifics of what's happening in these Supreme Court battles, because the details reveal just how much trouble the Trump administration is really in. Let's start with the SNAP benefits fight, because this is where the court's frustration with Trump's legal team is most visible. The background here is that during the government shutdown, Trump's administration decided to only pay 65% of SNAP benefits instead of the full amount people were owed. Lower courts, multiple federal judges, ruled this was illegal and ordered the administration to pay in full using emergency and contingency funds that exist precisely for situations like this. Trump's team has been fighting those rulings, asking higher courts to stay the orders while they appeal. They want to be allowed to keep cutting food aid while the legal process plays out, which could take months. And meanwhile, millions of families are wondering if they'll have enough money to eat. The case reached the Supreme Court when the administration asked for an emergency stay of the lower court orders. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who handles emergency matters for the relevant circuit, granted a temporary pause on the district court's ruling. But she didn't just grant the pause and move on. She demanded that the administration provide a same-day update on their current position in the dispute. That's highly unusual. Justices don't normally demand same-day responses from parties in emergency cases. They give lawyers time to prepare. They follow normal briefing schedules. But Jackson apparently saw something in the administration's filings that made her want immediate clarity about what they actually want. She was essentially telling Trump's lawyers to stop hedging, stop playing procedural games, and state clearly whether they intend to keep pursuing a stay or not. The response from the Solicitor General's office was revealing in how it exposed the administration's contradictory positions. They admitted they were simultaneously fighting the district court order requiring full SNAP payments while also hoping that congressional action on shutdown legislation would make the whole issue moot. Think about what that means. They're asking the Supreme Court to let them cut food aid for millions of Americans. But they're also saying they might not need the court to do anything if Congress passes a bill that ends the shutdown and funds SNAP separately. They want the legal victory of being allowed to cut benefits, but they also want an escape hatch if Congress gives them one. That's not a principled legal position. That's trying to have it both ways. And Justice Jackson's demand for clarity suggests she recognized this and wanted to force them to commit to something rather than continuing to maneuver. The extraordinary pressure SCOTUS blog and CNN are describing reflects how unusual this dynamic is. The Supreme Court doesn't normally put this kind of squeeze on the Solicitor General. There's usually a presumption of good faith and professional courtesy between the court and the government's lawyers. But something about how the administration has been handling this case has clearly frustrated at least some of the justices. Maybe it's the constantly shifting positions. Maybe it's the apparent attempt to delay and obstruct rather than litigate in good faith. Maybe it's the human stakes involved, 42 million people depending on food assistance while lawyers play procedural games. Whatever the specific trigger, the court is signaling that it's not going to let the administration just run out the clock or avoid taking clear positions. Now let's talk about the tariff situation, because the leaks there are equally damaging to Trump's credibility. The administration has been insisting publicly that they're confident the Supreme Court will uphold Trump's authority to impose tariffs using emergency powers. Trump himself has said he expects to win. His trade advisors have dismissed concerns about the case. The public messaging has been that the tariffs are legally sound, and the court will recognize that. But internal documents tell a completely different story. Bloomberg and Forbes are reporting that the White House is actively developing fallback options in case the justices rule Trump's tariff powers illegal. They're looking at alternative legal authorities that might allow narrower country-specific duties. They're exploring diplomatic negotiations that could replace unilateral tariffs with negotiated trade agreements. They're essentially planning for a post-tariff world where Trump's signature trade policy has been struck down. The fact that this planning has leaked is devastating for Trump's public position. You can't credibly claim confidence about winning while your own team is preparing backup plans for losing. The leak exposes the gap between public spin and private reality. It shows that Trump's advisors are much more worried about this case than they're letting on. And it raises questions about everything else the administration says about its legal position. If they're this worried about tariffs despite public confidence, what else are they misrepresenting? The internal planning reportedly includes some fairly detailed scenarios for different ways the court might rule. If the justices strike down tariffs entirely, the administration has one set of options. If they narrow the president's authority but don't eliminate it completely, there's another set of options. If they rule on procedural grounds that require the administration to go back and try again, there's a third set of options. This level of contingency planning tells you the administration thinks any of these outcomes are possible, including complete defeat. The oral arguments that generated all this worry were indeed brutal for the administration. Justices from across the ideological spectrum asked skeptical questions about whether Congress ever intended to give presidents such sweeping power to impose tariffs by declaring trade emergencies. They pointed to constitutional provisions giving Congress control over commerce and taxation. They questioned whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act was meant to cover routine trade disputes or was reserved for genuine national security crises. Analysts who watched the arguments describe a majority of justices sounding deeply skeptical of Trump's legal theory. One analysis concluded that taxpayers are likely to win, meaning the people challenging the tariffs will probably succeed. Another said the justices appeared inclined to invalidate at least part of Trump's tariff regime on both statutory and constitutional grounds. This wasn't friendly questioning, where justices were looking for reasons to uphold the tariffs. This was hostile questioning, where justices seemed to be building the case for striking them down. The political implications of losing on tariffs would be enormous for Trump. The tariffs have been central to his economic nationalism agenda. They're how he claims to be protecting American workers and bringing manufacturing back. They're what he points to when he says he's being tough on China and other trading partners. If the Supreme Court rules he never had the authority to impose them in the first place, that's not just a legal defeat, it's a fundamental challenge to his economic brand. And the potential requirement to unwind existing tariffs or even refund money that's already been collected would be administratively chaotic and politically embarrassing. Companies would have to recalculate costs, prices might fluctuate. The entire trade policy framework Trump has built would be thrown into uncertainty. The combination of the snap pressure and the tariff preparation shows a pattern of an administration that's losing control of its legal destiny. On issue after issue, they're finding that the Supreme Court isn't going to simply defer to claims of executive authority. They're finding that justices, including conservative justices, have limits on how much they'll stretch to accommodate Trump's preferences. They're finding that the legal theories underlying their most aggressive moves don't hold up under scrutiny from the nation's highest court, and they're responding not with confidence but with panic, begging for time on snap, drafting backup plans on tariffs, trying to spin inevitable defeats as strategic pivots. The West Wing is scrambling, Republican allies on the Hill are nervous, and the leaks keep coming, exposing just how much gap exists between what the administration says publicly and what they actually believe privately. The credibility damage from all of this extends beyond just these two cases. When you're caught preparing for defeat while claiming confidence in victory, it undermines everything else you say. When justices are demanding same-day answers because they don't trust you to give straight information, it signals something has gone wrong in your relationship with the court. When internal planning documents leak showing your real assessment differs dramatically from your public statements, it makes people question every other claim you're making. The Trump administration has always relied heavily on controlling the narrative, saying things confidently and counting on that confidence to shape reality. But the Supreme Court doesn't care about spin. Justices look at legal arguments, not press releases, and what they're seeing from the administration apparently isn't impressive. Okay, let's break this down into clear points so you understand exactly what's happening and why these leaks are so damaging for the Trump administration. Point number 1, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson put extraordinary pressure on Trump's legal team in the SNAP benefits case by demanding a same-day update on whether they still intended to pursue a stay blocking full food aid payments. This highly unusual demand signals judicial frustration with the administration's legal maneuvering. The Solicitor General's response admitted they were simultaneously fighting to cut food aid while hoping Congress would bail them out with shutdown legislation. That's not a coherent legal strategy. That's desperation dressed up in legal briefs. When justices start demanding same-day answers because they don't trust you to give straight information through normal processes, something has gone seriously wrong. The administration is being called out for playing games while millions of families wait to find out if they'll have enough money for groceries. Point number 2, internal documents reveal the administration is actively developing fallback options in case the Supreme Court strikes down Trump's tariff powers, completely contradicting their public claims of confidence about winning the case. Bloomberg and Forbes reporting shows the White House is planning for scenarios where the justices gut their IEEPA tariff authority. They're looking at narrower country-specific duties. They're exploring negotiated alternatives. They're preparing for a world where Trump's signature trade policy gets invalidated. The leak of this internal planning devastates their public credibility because you can't claim confidence about winning while secretly preparing detailed contingency plans for losing. It exposes the gap between spin and reality that defines so much of how this administration operates. Point number 3, oral arguments on the tariff case were brutal for the administration, with justices from across the ideological spectrum expressing deep skepticism about whether Congress ever intended to give presidents such sweeping trade authority. Analysts who watched the arguments describe a majority of justices sounding hostile to Trump's legal theory. One analysis concluded taxpayers challenging the tariffs are likely to win. Another said the justices appeared inclined to invalidate at least part of the tariff regime on both statutory and constitutional grounds. This wasn't justices looking for reasons to uphold the tariffs. This was justices building the foundation for striking them down. And the administration's internal preparation for defeat shows they reached the same conclusion about how the arguments went, even while publicly insisting they're confident. Point number 4, the combination of these two crises paints a picture of a White House in complete reactive mode, scrambling to manage legal defeats while trying to maintain public confidence that's increasingly disconnected from reality. On snap, they're begging the court for time while refusing to commit to clear positions. On tariffs, they're publicly confident while privately drafting Plan B policies. They're trying to calm nervous Republicans on Capitol Hill. They're trying to spin looming defeats as strategic pivots. But the leaks keep undermining the spin by revealing what they actually believe internally. This is not what confident winning leadership looks like. This is damage control and crisis management pretending to be strength. Point number 5, these Supreme Court battles hit real voters in tangible ways because they involve grocery prices, food aid for 42 million Americans, trade jobs, and the economic stability that tariff uncertainty creates. This isn't abstract legal theory. This is people's ability to afford food and keep their jobs. Any adverse ruling will give Trump's critics fresh ammunition to say his shock and awe second-term agenda is collapsing under legal scrutiny. The political fallout from losing on SNAP or tariffs extends far beyond just the legal defeats themselves. It feeds narratives about incompetence, overreach, and an administration that can't deliver on its promises because the courts keep blocking them. Now let's talk about what this means for the broader trajectory of Trump's second term, because these Supreme Court battles are part of a larger pattern. From the beginning of this term, Trump has governed based on aggressive assertions of executive power. He's claimed emergency authorities. He's pushed constitutional limits. He's dared courts to stop him. And increasingly, courts are stopping him. The SNAP case is courts saying you can't cut food aid just because you want leverage in budget negotiations. The tariff case might be the Supreme Court saying you can't impose massive trade barriers just by declaring an emergency. Add in all the other legal setbacks we've been covering, the rulings about unconstitutional deployments, the findings about prosecutorial misconduct, the judicial rebukes of administration lawyers, and you see a pattern of an executive branch running into the limits of what courts will tolerate. The Supreme Court was supposed to be Trump's backstop. He appointed 3 justices. The court has a conservative majority. The assumption in MAGA world was that even if lower courts caused trouble, the Supreme Court would ultimately back Trump on the big issues. But that's not what's happening. On tariffs, even conservative justices are skeptical of Trump's legal theory. On SNAP, justices are putting extraordinary pressure on the administration to stop playing games. The court isn't rubber stamping Trump's power grabs. It's scrutinizing them carefully and finding serious problems. That's devastating for an administration that built its legal strategy around counting on Supreme Court support. For Republicans, heading into 2026, these Supreme Court troubles create real political vulnerabilities. If Trump loses on tariffs, Republicans have to explain why their president imposed billions in potentially illegal taxes on American consumers. If Trump loses on SNAP, Republicans have to explain why their administration tried to cut food aid for 42 million people. If the pattern of legal defeats continues, Republicans have to explain why they're supporting a president whose signature policies keep getting struck down by courts. The legal losses translate into political problems that candidates in competitive districts will have to address. The leaks showing the administration preparing for defeat while claiming confidence makes those political problems even worse because it suggests dishonesty on top of legal failure. The credibility gap exposed by these leaks is perhaps the most significant long-term damage. An administration that's caught saying one thing publicly while believing another thing privately can't be trusted on anything else they say. If they're misrepresenting their confidence on tariffs, what else are they misrepresenting? If they're hiding their real assessment of the SNAP case, what else are they hiding? The leaks don't just damage these specific cases, they damage the administration's ability to be believed about anything. And that matters because governing requires some baseline of credibility. When you lose that, everything becomes harder. Every statement gets questioned. Every claim gets scrutinized. Every assertion of confidence gets met with skepticism based on the pattern of previous misrepresentations. Here's the bottom line. Supreme Court leaks have thrown the Trump administration into turmoil by exposing the gap between their public confidence and private panic on two major legal battles. On SNAP benefits, Justice Jackson is putting extraordinary pressure on Trump's lawyers, demanding same-day answers and calling out their attempt to have it both ways. On tariffs, internal documents show the administration preparing detailed fallback options in case the justices strike down their signature trade policy, completely contradicting public claims of confidence. The oral arguments went badly. The justices are skeptical. The backup plans are being drafted, and all of it is leaking, showing the world that this administration is far shakier than it wants anyone to believe. So stay tuned, because these Supreme Court cases are going to resolve soon, and the outcomes could reshape Trump's entire second-term agenda. If the justices rule against him on tariffs, his signature economic policy gets gutted. If they rule against him on SNAP, his attempt to weaponize food aid fails. Either loss would be politically damaging and would validate everything critics have been saying about executive overreach and legal incompetence. The leaks suggest the administration is already preparing for these defeats, even while publicly insisting they'll win. That preparation tells you everything you need to know about their real assessment of where things stand. The Supreme Court isn't rubber stamping Trump's power grabs. It's scrutinizing them carefully. And based on what we're seeing from the arguments, the orders, and the leaked internal planning, Trump's lawyers know they're probably going to lose. The only question is how badly, and what happens next when they do. Welcome to the turmoil. It's only going to get more chaotic from here.